how you doing? It is I, the Terrorific Lady, otherwise known as Brandy, and welcome to Retro Horror School, and happy Friday! We have reached another Friday. Today's video is the first in a series about the different horror subgenres. Want to guess which one I'll be talking about first? You got 3 seconds. Slashers. Did you ever wonder why we like seeing mass killers with interesting weapons stalk down people in interesting ways? We are going to dive into the bloody world of the horror subgenre. We will be talking a little bit about the history of the slasher, the characteristics of a slasher, or what makes up slasher, the different subgenres of slashers. Yep, the horror subgenre of slasher also has subgenres. And we're going to go over some examples of some slashers. Let's start with the history of slashers in the 1970s. Now, some people may argue that slashers started before the 1970s with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And while that is a fair assessment, it is movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas, and Halloween that laid the groundwork. This is where the slasher genre really took root.
Just the two of us.
Halloween is credited as becoming a blueprint for the slasher genre, where it has the mass killer Michael Myers stalking babysitters, most notably Laurie Strode, and this kind of stalking and facing off against the final girl set in stone a lot of the tropes that you would see in 80s slasher horror. Now, the 80s are considered the golden age of the slasher. You had franchises like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street that became big in this decade and really took off. And it really honed and cemented the trope of the final girl going up and facing off against the killer and winning. You saw this a lot in the 80s. Now we go to the 90s, where the slasher was kind of on a downward slope. There were still like some really good horror movies that were coming out in the 90s, but slashers were on a downward slope. And then with the release of Wes Craven's 1996 meta slasher hit Scream, you saw the slasher going on the uptick again. And then you also saw a lot of teen slashers come out, like Urban Legend and I Know What You Did Last Summer are 2 examples. Last but not least, we're moving into the 2000s and the 2010s, where you saw remakes of beloved classics like Rob Zombie's take of John Carpenter's Halloween in 2007, and innovative films like The Cabin in the Woods that offer different takes and twists on the slasher.
Let's get this party started.
Oh, shit.
Now, let's talk a little bit about what makes a slasher a slasher. So, 1, slashers tend to have a very iconic character. The character is remembered maybe by the mask that they wear, what they look like, what they say, the weapon that they choose. Something about them sticks out and makes them iconic too. In slashers, killers usually target teenagers and young adults. which tends to be indicative, you see, of a lot of coming of age scenarios where the final girl, boy, the final person almost comes into their own in a way and gains new strength and finds bravery when they're facing down the killer. And then the killer likes to, in a way, almost tease the victim. So there's a lot of cat and mouse games, the killer playing with the victims and the killer almost taunting and torturing everybody. 3, there's usually an element of mystery around the killer's motives. At least at the beginning, you don't know why they do what they do, or they may never explain why they do what they do. It just depends on the movie and the type of slasher. 4, slashers usually have a lot of murders and kills in very almost graphic and, dare I say, inventive ways. And 5, slashers are usually set in very remote areas, not all the time, but usually. So you'll see settings like summer camps, cabins in the woods, houses in the middle of nowhere. This adds to the feeling and the sense of danger and helplessness. So I know you would never see me going off to a cabin in the woods or a house that is out in the middle of nowhere. That is a recipe for disaster. Now, just like horror comes in various flavors, slashers come in various flavors. Let's break down and go over the different kinds of slashers that exist. First up, you have the Italian giallo. Giallos love to mix style and stylized violence with slashers. Think things like Suspiria and Deep Red. Next, we have the supernatural slashers, where the killer has some kind of supernatural element behind them. Candyman is a great example and a known example of a supernatural slasher. Then backwoods slashers are slashers that are usually set in remote country, almost backwoods areas. Wrong Turn is an example of a backwoods slasher. Revenge slashers are a type of slasher where the killer is motivated by past wrongs. They're pissed and they're out to get people. I Know What You Did Last Summer is a good example of a revenge slasher. Summer camp slashers are just like they sound. So teen summer camp slashers are set at summer camps where usually the counselors, are picked off one by one. Friday the 13th is the go-to summer camp slasher. Then you have the whodunit slashers, where you don't know who the killer is or their identity, if at all, until the very end of the movie. Scream did a very good job of nailing this. And then finally, meta slashers. So meta slashers are very self-aware. They play with the tropes of the genre. Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon is a good example of a meta slasher horror film.
You have no idea how much cardio I have to do. It's ridiculous.
Why so much?
Well, you gotta be able to run like a freaking gazelle without getting winded. Plus, there's that whole thing of making it look like you're walking, and everybody else is running their asses off.
Oh, right.
And I gotta stay with them.
Yeah.
It's tough, man. It's tough.
And we are done. We've learned a little bit about the brief history of the slasher starting in the 1970s, the characteristics of a slasher, and the different subgenres of slasher. So what I would like to know is, what is your favorite slasher film? Let me know in the comments below. You can follow me on Instagram and Threads, Terrorific Lady. I lurk over there. And I am redoing stuff with my Ko-fi, different tiers. I'll be opening up my Ko-fi shop soon. Very excited about that. But my Ko-fi is also at Terrorific Lady. If you'd like to support, I appreciate greatly everyone's support, no matter where you are and where you give it. And sadly, class is dismissed, everybody, but I will see you next time. Bye.